Greatness is a transitory experience. It is never consistent. It depends in part upon the myth-making imagination of humankind. The person who experiences greatness must have a feeling for the myth he is in. He must reflect what is projected upon him. This quote from Dune captures the idea of masculinity being mythological, especially when a person has a feeling for the myth they are partaking in. When they realize that the world is a stage, and you can play the part of a noble, virtuous man, and really align yourself with this mythological vision to manifest something which is beyond being merely human. It depends upon realizing that you are playing a role, that you can mold yourself into an idealized, mythological version of yourself, and attempting to strive for that higher spiritual ideal is what entails the essence of becoming a man. In other words, masculinity has a kind of fictional side to it, whereby one aligns themselves with a mythological conceptualization in order to turn it from mere fiction into reality, and to go beyond being merely a natural being. Now, to be clear, masculinity isn't entirely mythological. It is also an objective fact of nature. That testosterone in your bloodstream is most definitely real. But in humans, this gets carried beyond pure nature, because we are not creatures that are entirely beholden to nature. We are also beholden to what we call spiritual principles, which are not encoded in our DNA, but are rather endowed upon us by culture. Our values, our morals, and other metaphysical aspects of our identities, like our religions, nationalities, and our social or career roles. Masculinity in humans therefore also has a spiritual or mythological dimension, and to tap into this higher spiritual masculinity, it involves willingly accepting the mythological role of being a man. It entails treating life as though it were a narrative, and you played a supremely important role within it. And you do so, even if it feels easier to simply rely on your habitual instincts or to base your actions on your emotions. I'm making this video because I've begun to notice many men who don't seem willing or capable of striving for something greater. They lack ambition, they lack direction, and as a result, they regress into being passively shaped by their environments. And they are extremely anxious whenever they are called to partake in something which demands noble, heroic effort. They have become disconnected from the mythological foundations of masculinity and are consequently disoriented. They shirk responsibility and prefer to stick to comfort and pleasurable activities rather than heroically tackling the challenges of life by seeking difficulty and seeking greatness. They fail to see that life has a mythological dimension by which they can transcend their humanity and strive for something greater. Regressing in this manner is, in my opinion, an enormous waste of one's life. Yes, you can spend all of your time seeking pleasure and comfort, but there is more to life than that. And it is possible to evolve into a being who bravely faces discomfort, who pushes against the resistance they feel from within and from the outer world in order to transcend themselves. Such individuals are not only healthier psychologically, they tend to have a net benefit on the world at large, as they are less easily swayed by mass-mindedness. This is why I wish to elaborate upon the idea of mythological masculinity, so that people can recognize the inherent mythological character of masculinity, which opens a way to become a better, stronger man, who can rise to the challenges of life without shying away or fleeing towards comfortable distractions. But before I do that, allow me to introduce the sponsor of this video. In the novel Grasshopper Sharpshooter, you are introduced to a world unlike anything I've ever really seen before. The complicated mythology of this world is just so next level and so ambitious that there were many times where I just felt this sense of sheer profoundness, almost like the author somehow escaped Samsara and decided to re-enter it in order to tell us what it was like escaping. The book really goes hard with the deep metaphysical concepts, and I see a whole range of philosophical and spiritual inspirations having shaped this work. So please consider checking out Grasshopper Sharpshooter. This is a self-published author, so he doesn't have the advantage of a known publisher marketing for him, but I'm happy to do so, and I think you will really enjoy getting lost in this world that he has created. Now, to understand the connection between masculinity and mythology, we will need to discuss the father archetype. We are each born with a father archetype, which is the natural instinct to identify a father figure and obey their authority. We do so because they are older, wiser, and more experienced than us, so we can leverage the wisdom they have accumulated to make the right decisions for us. But we don't just obey their authority, we also begin to see them as a kind of mythological being who we can also strive to be. And so we begin to imitate this perceived higher being. And by imitating them, we also become mythological, pushing against our instincts to become a being who transcends mere nature. This involves adopting the principles and values which these father figures embody through their actions and teach through their lessons. Our minds have an astonishing capacity to observe others and imitate their behavior, as there are dedicated brain regions for imitation. When we see an example of what we can also be, we attempt to imitate these characteristics. This is why men who grow up without any good role models or father figures can become so lost in life and regress into being incapable of upholding higher principles or taking on responsibilities. In the absence of adequate mythological father figures, we sometimes turn to substitutes who, in my opinion, are less than ideal, and who embody a vision of masculinity which is devoid of the higher spiritual principles of nobleness, virtue, and divinity. However, the absence of suitable father figures need not necessarily destine one away from the path of mythological masculinity. Humans have the ability to imagine other, higher beings, gods, demigods, and mythological heroes, and such beings represent idealized visions, heroic individuals who possess characteristics that we may attempt to attain and emulate. They uphold higher spiritual principles and are virtuous. They accomplish enormously difficult feats using physical strength, willpower, and sheer determination. They may face defeat, but then learn the importance of resilience and continue moving forward. And so the heroic, masculine men who appear in our stories are a vision of something we can strive to be. They first exist as mere characters, but they too serve as role models, whose example can shape our behavior. In fact, this is exactly what they are. And these mythological beings have had a tangible impact on shaping how we behave. I contend that Christians, being followers of Christ, have attempted to emulate his example, and so have, on average, become more Christ-like, humble, kind, compassionate, and forgiving. As Erich Neumann wrote, "The immortal soul of the divine king Osiris becomes the immortal soul of each and every Egyptian, even as Christ the Savior becomes the Christ soul of every Christian, the self within us." These mythological figures always embody particular ideals, which vary from culture to culture and time period to time period, and they served as guides for what people could attempt to emulate. And by doing so, humans themselves were becoming metaphysical beings, poised midway between gods and beasts. This is why humans have developed a far more sophisticated notion of masculinity, which goes beyond simply being a tough guy who uses aggression to get what he wants. To be a man, therefore, also involves playing the part of a higher man who upholds the metaphysical laws, values, and morals of his culture. And this is where we come to the fact that all of this involves a willingness to act the part, to play the role of these higher idealizations of masculinity so that they truly begin to manifest. Take, for example, a person in a leadership role. They must act the part, so to speak, in order to be an effective leader and rise to the challenge. It really is an act. And this may trigger feelings of imposter syndrome. But the cure to imposter syndrome is to realize that everyone is playing an act. We are all souls playing roles, because human existence is inherently mythological. If you loosen yourself from that fact, it represents a regression away from the spiritual and towards the natural. It leads one to wind carelessly down the road of life, unable to manifest the higher being they are called to be. To go beyond the natural, you must partake in your own mythology, and play the role of the higher human being you wish to emulate. You can decide for yourself what this ideal self would look like, what kinds of qualities and traits do you want to embody, and you can really begin to play this role, no differently from an actor on a stage. Bravery, courage, and the drive to climb towards greatness depends on becoming a mythological being, on imitating a higher ideal, an idealized version of a human being captured in mythological form, and then aligning yourself with it. Masculinity is endowing oneself with agency, with the ability to act rather than being merely acted upon by the wills of other people. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the ability to act despite the fear, and the ability to act depends upon adopting the traits of a brave person, and then allowing this higher principle to wrap itself around your mind and body. In doing so, a being who is truly beyond nature, truly metaphysical, and truly mythological begins to manifest. To resist our inner animal impulses and act differently, act deliberately, to still the mind from reacting spontaneously, and to choose a different, nobler course, all depend upon envisioning an ideal version of yourself, and then aligning yourself with this role. In doing so, you yourself become a role model who others will seek to emulate. Morality is of the same nature. To uphold morality and not revert to a merely instinctual or emotional being, but a being that upholds higher spiritual principles, means acting as an exemplar for others to emulate. The easy path is the unrighteous path, but one can follow the higher path, the path which is merely fictional and hypothetical, until a man is able to manifest it. Now, some of you might be thinking that isn't this just reinforcing the persona, which is not the true self? Well, yes, but being a mythological man doesn't mean you need to act at all times, because there will be times where you must withdraw and allow other aspects of your nature to find room to breathe. Instead, one must be a higher man when they are called to it. You can't play a character all the time, but masculinity depends upon being willing to adapt the mantle of manhood, not as something which comes to you naturally, but as something which you must force yourself to do, something which encounters resistance, but which nevertheless persists. This also doesn't mean permanently severing yourself from your natural foundations, because this is impossible. Rather, different aspects of your nature must be integrated so that they can coexist in one being. And so yes, being a man does mean wearing a persona, but there is a way to wear this persona without disconnecting yourself from the deeper, more fundamental parts of your psyche. All of this can be summed up with the following quote from Erich Neumann. Not until the hero identifies himself with what we have called the masculine heaven can he enter upon his fight with the dragon. The identification culminates in the feeling that he is the son of God, embodying in himself the whole mightiness of heaven. This is as much to say that all heroes are God-begotten. Heavenly succor, the feeling of being rooted up aloft in the Father Divinity, who is not just the head of the family, but a creative spirit, alone makes possible the fight with the dragon of the Great Mother. Representing and upholding this spiritual world in the face of the dragon, the hero becomes the liberator and savior, the innovator and bringer of wisdom and culture. In the next video, we will break down Erich Neumann's writings on the concept of mythological masculinity. But before I let you go, I have an announcement. After many years of learning and training, I'm finally working as a psychotherapist. As you all know, I'm well trained in Jungian psychology and depth psychology, and these are the kind of main approaches I use when doing therapy. While my videos can be helpful, they may also be unspecific when it comes to your individual needs. And so if you're interested in working with me and pursuing your therapeutic goals using a Jungian lens, and to be clear, this is not the only lens that I use. I'm trained in a lot of different therapeutic modalities, and I try to bring them all in when I do therapy. But if you're interested in working with me and letting me help you achieve your therapeutic goals, you can definitely do so. I put a link in the description where you can book a session with me, or you can even book a consultation, where we can discuss your therapeutic goals and what you're hoping to get out of the therapy experience. Prices are negotiable, so we can definitely discuss that during the consultation, and we can also discuss things like insurance. But yeah, if you're interested in working with me, please feel free to book a free consultation using the link below. I'm working with this amazing agency in Ontario, and I couldn't be happier. But yeah, thanks for watching, have a good day, and may good luck always come your way.